The world of crowdfunding is in chaos this week after originally insisting they don't comment on individual creators and terms of use enforcement. Patreon now says, just kidding, I guess we do comment since all of you are so pissed off about Sargon, but we're gonna double down. There's gonna be no hate speech on Patreon, you guys, so deal with it. And by the look of the ratio in the responses, maybe there will in fact be no hate speech on Patreon, because there will be no Patreon. I'll have more to say about this PR disaster later this week or next. After reaching out to me unsolicited for damage control last week, Patreon reps have agreed to have a phone call with me this week, so I expect to have a report back for all of you on how that goes. I of course invited them to have this conversation on a stream with me so they could tell you themselves, but Patreon offered no response to that particular portion of the discussion. Due to Patreon committing suicide at the altar of social justice and then putting one more bullet into its own dead body for good measure, many creators, myself included, have been exploring alternatives, leading us to Subscribestar, the place where Sargon found a home after his ban. But before people could convert their support over, before many people could even create an account, it was already deplatformed by PayPal, and so Subscribestar has temporarily suspended transactions while it arranges for another payment processor. It is abundantly clear that what we are watching is a coordinated mob in action, placated by Silicon Valley tech giants who happen to agree with their political persuasions. The fact that the commentary for which Sargon was banned is some 10 months old, the fact that Subscribestar gets the boot in perfect timing with the transition over, these things aren't happening organically. These things are happening because of an organized effort to make them happen. Exactly who doing exactly what is still a little unclear, but the clues are there. And since these people are intent in meddling in others' livelihoods, people who objectively did nothing wrong other than hold opinions the mob doesn't like, I think it's time a little scrutiny gets returned. One of the characters at the forefront of this Subscribestar deplatforming is self-described PhD candidate at Edinburgh University Tim Squirrell, perhaps aptly named for his jumpy, skittish attempts at stealing everyone else's acorns since his own stash is woefully unprepared for winter. That, or maybe he just loves gobbling nuts. Take your pick. Tim appointed himself the policeman of Subscribestar last week. He urged others to lobby services utilized by the site like PayPal and credit card processors. He tipped the creator of the so-called alternative influence network, the Nazi spiderweb lady Becca Lewis, and of course he solicited the help of the creature from the Estrogen Lagoon, Jared Holt. Soon after the PayPal deplatforming was complete, Subscribestar transactions were paused, and Tim was on Twitter celebrating what he calls a success. But I'd call it giving others a temporary tour of his own misery and failure. Tim is quoted in the Financial Times coverage of this deplatforming saying the question Subscribestar is going to need to deal with in the coming days and weeks as it receives more publicity from the alt-right creators beginning to use it will be where it draws the line. Nobody asked that question, Tim. Only you asked that question on behalf of nobody else, and Subscribestar doesn't have to answer it because you're not a party to those transactions. In lieu of their response, I'll answer that question for you. The line is illegal activity, and the rest is none of your goddamn business. I want to understand and scrutinize these people, not just because they're scrutinizing all of us for wrongthink and trying to bully dissidents against their worldview into line, but because the casualties of their crusade go well beyond simply the content of the speech they seek to censor. Both Styx and Tim Pool have made excellent points on this issue that I'll repeat. First, every deplatforming isn't just a gag on one person's ability to speak. It's a gag on all of our ability to listen to that speech. A deplatforming shouldn't be taken as just an aggression against the speaker. It should be taken as an aggression against you and your ability to listen to that speech and decide for yourself what you think about it. And secondly, they've gone so far in this crusade, they don't even care about collateral damage. The banning of Sargon on Patreon has had massive negative consequences for creators across the board, myself included. The deplatforming at Subscribestar has punished creators making content totally unrelated to Sargon, or politics, or social issues at all. These people don't care about the livelihoods of their targets, obviously, but they also don't care about the livelihoods of other people simply caught in the crossfire. They don't deserve deference or reference as authority figures in news coverage on this issue. They deserve serious criticism as the authoritarian censors that they are. Given their treatment of others, serious scrutiny is actually very polite treatment for them. So it's with this attitude that I went to have a look at this Tim Squirrell fellow to try to understand his philosophy on speech and why he views it as his and his friends' duty to decide for you and I what we get to say and what we get to listen to. I ventured over to Tim's YouTube channel to see what I could learn about his worldview, immediately laughing at the irony that he basically makes two things over here. One is tips on writing better persuasive essays, and the other is philosophy on why persuasion isn't sufficient to conquer bad ideas. Yeah, it turns out sunlight isn't the best disinfectant, actually. So I guess don't work on your argumentation skills. Just consult Tim Squirrell and he'll give you the correct ideas, so you won't have to do any of that pesky thinking for yourself. And when you listen to these videos, you'll see that appointing himself the gatekeeper of the correct viewpoints for society is fundamental to Tim's philosophy, or at least not trusting you to make those decisions for yourself. You can't be trusted to assess ideas for yourself because you might be tricked by appearances or charisma.
Arguments aren't made in a vacuum. Their appeal is a product of who is making them, what they look like, whether they're pushing your buttons, whether they sound reasonable, and whether they're being made by somebody you like. And that's why Richard Spencer looks so polished all the time.
You can't be trusted to assess ideas for yourself because you're susceptible to manipulation.
It's why a lot of people are fighting quite hard to try to deplatform Nazis and fascists to prevent them from gaining access to new audiences who might be vulnerable to the kinds of manipulations they engage in.
You can't be trusted to assess ideas for yourself because you're naturally looking for an authority figure, and you might inadvertently pick the wrong one.
Let's say that you host a fascist on your TV show. They flip the argument. They went on your show and were entirely reasonable, and look how poorly you treated them. They were civil and you were intolerant, and these are used as ways to connect with an audience who are already disaffected and are looking for a new authority figure.
You can't be trusted to assess ideas for yourself because you might investigate thoroughly before making a final decision.
The first issue is that giving them a platform grants them a new audience. Let's just say you're a TV host and you have a prominent neo-Nazi on your program, just to challenge them. They come over pretty badly. Even then, a minority of your viewers are inclined to check out some more of their stuff.
And of course, you can't be trusted to handle difficult ideas for yourself because you're so weak and pathetic that you need Tim Squirrell to be your savior.
What's so important about being able to take insult after insult that you fetishize emotional fortitude in this way? Why can't you embrace the reality that some people in society are weak, they are vulnerable, they are hurt in ways that go beyond the temporary and emotional by the things that you say?
Well, thank God, we all get the hero nobody needs and nobody asked for. Maybe I fetishize having a thick skin because I'd rather look out for myself than entrust that responsibility to you. If the option is to entrust you with my safety, Tim, I think I'll risk the nutless winter myself, thanks. And that's really the point. I'll grant everything Tim says about how mean and dangerous the Nazis are, but the fundamental question he never answers explicitly, only implicitly through his actions, is who should decide the good ideas from the bad, for you and for me? Is that our responsibility? Is that our own right? Or is that Tim's to do for us? And that's actually a question with deep moral implications, and considering them makes me realize some of my own shortcomings in defending the values of freedom from these authoritarians. Tim and his fellow social justice activists are always making a moral case, claiming the moral high ground in their fight against those they label Nazis and alt-right, and we can't yield that moral high ground to them, because what they do is fundamentally immoral. I'm always making the logical and philosophical case for free speech, why it's practical, why it produces good results, and that case is still of foundational importance, but it alone may be insufficient. There's a moral case for free speech as well, and there's certainly a moral case to be left alone in your financial business as long as you aren't harming anyone as well. There's a moral case that your words and your thoughts are yours alone to craft, and anyone robbing you of your ability to speak or to listen person is robbing you of your most fundamental human right, and that person has far more business at the bottom of a dungeon of sinners than they do high atop an ivory tower on Moral Mountain. They're not serving their fellow man. They're undercutting his most basic capacities and seizing power from him to serve themselves. That is the case that people like me have got to start making, and I see that now. So thank you, Tim Squirrell, for helping me to realize it. But still, eat a sack of nuts. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter, that is at @MLChristiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.